writing stuff. So I figured, how about we just talk about comic book writing? And I found some clips of Grant Morrison that we can watch together and discuss. And I'm also going to be trying to make my mustard man a little bit more golden. I found a couple of gold paints that I'm going to attempt to use. Let's see how well this works. One of them looks like super duper shiny. And yeah, so I guess without further ado, let us get started. Screen share. Bloop. And bloop. There we are. Make sure everything still looks good. All right, so I got a couple of shorter clips of Grant Morrison here, and I also found this very long video that we're probably not going to get to the end to. I'm not sure what it is, but it seems like it could be interesting. And for those of you who are looking at the title and are like, what's a tulpa? And the basic gist of a tulpa is that basically you put so much belief into a thing or a person that it comes into reality. Typically, if a bunch of people believe in that thing being real, it comes into reality. And if you've read any Grant Morrison comic book, you will know that he is very, very, very big on that concept. And yeah, so let's get started with our first clip of him talking about the Doom Patrol. I've read that. I've read his run on Doom Patrol, and it is very weird. I guess I do recommend it, but keep in mind it is very weird.
Some of the experiments were just the basics, like doing the William Burroughs thing, where you would actually cut up newspaper articles and find ideas.
Wait, the what thing? Let's start this over. Squirt art? Oh, well.
Some of the experiments were just the basics, like doing the William Burroughs thing, where you would actually cut up newspaper articles and find ideas. The thing that I did on Doom Patrol a lot was to use the spell check function in the computer, and you don't really get this anymore. But I would just write in a nonsense word like scribbles and then ask it to suggest an alternative, and it would come up with something. So if you wrote a lot of nonsense words
that's an interesting way to go about it. All right.
With proper syntax and proper sentence structure, it would then translate it into this bizarre, just whatever word it could come up with to get as close as it could to the word gazvlipflitz, and it would suggest something. So you ended up with this absolute run of really bizarre, disconnected, poetic images. So stuff like that went into it, and I used to do this sealed writing, which was a technique I'd learned from the poet Peter Redgrove. And his idea was just at the end of the night, you just fill a page with whatever's in your head.
Just now realizing I forgot my paper towel. Hold on. I'm back.
No matter how weird, how boring, how scatological, and you put it away. You do that every night, and then 3 months later, you go back and look through it for kind of recurring themes or repeated images.
Like I said, Grant Morrison, his writing style can be kind of weird. And sometimes when he's explaining himself, it's like, what are you even talking about, dude? All right, let's try this again. I guess talk about going in a different direction with writing. I don't know if I would do that myself. I think it's like he's referring to the technique where you just list off as much random stuff as you can and see where you can go from there, like a word chain thing. which I guess if you're stuck, that'd be a good way to unstuck yourself, but I'm not too sure about that. I I do like the guy's work, but I am not like such a super fan where I take everything he says as gospel. Because sometimes he'll say some stuff and it's like, what? What the hell? I mean, that's not the most egregious thing he's ever said.
Writing All Star Superman specifically was almost, which,
Oh, and this is him in an interview where he's talking about All Star Superman. And All Star Superman is pretty much just a love letter to the old Superman comic books. It's very wacky. It's calling back to pretty much all the weird shenanigans that Superman used to get into back in the day in the comic books. And yeah.
the story of which sort of details these legendary labors that Superman accomplishes over the last sort of days of his life. For anyone who hasn't read it, Lex Luthor essentially sort of causes Superman to fly too close to our sun, and his cells get supercharged with solar radiation, and this cell death starts occurring, and he then realizes he has only so much time left, and so he starts to accomplishing all these heroic labors and 12 labors of Superman. And you described writing this story of writing Superman almost like the phrase you're using was like a monk contemplating the deeds of a saint. And you said, I remember you said you felt elevated and kind of like by sort of just contemplating like what would Superman, like you say, he's super creative, he's super in every single sense of the word. So like how would that make you feel as a writer? And I guess like what was that like? And did you, I guess, seeing things how Superman sees them, did you then sort of take that with you after All Star Superman? Did you move that into your life and into like your work in a sort of more broad sense?
Yeah, I mean, certainly as much as I felt I could, I'm not a fighter like Superman. I was raised as a pacifist by a soldier dad. So I've never been someone who likes getting into fights, although I've been in fights. So I generally try to solve things without fists. So I'm not like Superman in that way, but certainly writing the book was it was like Buddhist meditation almost. It was very much having to put yourself in the mind of someone who doesn't think like a human being, whose thoughts are purer and more exalted and more direct and just more to the point.
Yeah, I think he's getting. I totally get what he's getting because I've seen quite a few of the comic book pros who admonish some of the newer writers who try and be like, okay, what if I were Superman? Like, how would Superman be if he was like me? How would I handle the things that Superman goes through? And it's like, you're not supposed to think about Superman as, well, how would he be if I was Superman? You're supposed to be like getting into the mind of the character themselves. I think there was a panel where it was Frank Miller and Tom King talking about it. And Frank Miller just turns to Tom King and he's like, why are you trying to write Batman like yourself? Why are you trying to approach it as what if he was me when that's not the point of writing a Batman comic? The Batman comic is you are trying to write Batman. You're not trying to write yourself. And that is one thing I do respect the hell out of Grant Morrison is he embraces the superhero nature. He embraces the goofiness. He embraces all of the weird and wacky shenanigans that superheroes get into. He doesn't try to look through it in a logistical, how would I do it way. He looks at it in an, okay, these are our heroes, and I am going to write their stories, and I'm just going to add my own weird quirks to just like the setting and stuff like that. He's not trying to change the characters to be like him. He's trying to get into the world himself.
So that aspect of it really changed how I thought, and it did kind of push me into a position. I mean, round here, my version of Superman is looking after like 40 feral cats. So I'm kind of have to make sure they're okay. Like today, I have to go and get one cat some medicine because he's sick. I have to look after some kittens that have been born. So for me, there's that sense of responsibility that I feel is kind of Supermanian, let's call it, And so certainly things like that where you just feel
Those are things that you do because you say to yourself, well, this is the right thing to do. I don't really want to have to do this twice a day and have to feed 40 cats. I don't want to have to look after 40 animals. But it's the right thing to do if they're living in the space around your house. So stuff like that, where it just became really obvious from Superman's perspective, like what you do, and you sacrifice a certain extent to do these things in order to be there for other creatures or other people. So yeah, I mean, it really affected me in that way, and my sense of responsibility went through the roof, which wasn't necessarily great for mental health, but you know, it's
Oh yeah, Grant Morrison is also really into the concept of embodying the characters that you write, like mentally, physically, everything. And I think that's part of the reason why he went bald. I think it's to embody one of his characters from the Invisibles, the bald guy there. Yeah, he's a very interesting cat when it comes to writing.
we try our best. We try our best in the name of Superman.
Okay, so I guess that's basically a good introduction to who Grant Morrison is as a writer. Looks like we got, yeah, just checking on a few things here. All right, so let's see what this is. How imagination becomes reality, Grant Morrison and the Tulpa effect.
You are not real. Not the way you think you are. Not solid, not permanent, not the protagonist of some fixed story that started at birth and ends when your heart stops. You are a thought someone is having. Maybe that someone is you. Maybe that someone is something you invented so long ago you forgot you were pretending. Grant Morrison had a nervous breakdown in 1988. He was writing a comic book about insanity, about Arkham Asylum, that gothic fortress where Batman locks up all the minds that broke in interesting ways. Morrison was channeling madness, writing madness, and becoming madness. And then one day the character he created, a bald anarchist named King Mob, walked into
King Mob, that's his name. I kept wanting to call him Mob Psycho, but I'm like, no, that's the anime, that's not the character. But yeah, that's who I was thinking of.
his living room in Glasgow and sat down across from him. They had a conversation. Morrison couldn't remember who spoke first. That is when he understood. Fiction is not inert. Imagination is not passive. When you imagine something hard enough with enough detail, with enough belief, it does not stay on the page. It does not stay in your head. It gets up. It walks. It looks at you with your own eyes and asks what you thought you were doing. The Tibetan monks called these tulpas, thought forms, beings conjured from concentrated imagination, fed by attention until they achieve independence. Alexandra David Neal, the French explorer who walked forbidden roads through Tibet in the 1920s, she made one. A jolly little monk, round and cheerful. She visualized him during months of meditation until one day he was just there, walking beside her, visible not just to her, but to others in her traveling party. And then he changed. He grew thin. His face went sour. He started appearing when she did not summon him, showing up in her peripheral vision, watching her with something like hunger. It took her 6 months of focused ritual to destroy what she had created. 6 months to kill a thought. Philip K. Dick spent the last 8 years of his life trying to figure out if he was a science fiction writer or a Christian mystic named Thomas from the 1st century. Beaming.
Okay, yeah, this is when we're going into really getting into the heavy drugs.
Information into Dick's brain from outside time. He called it VALIS, Vast Active Living Intelligence System. Dick wrote book after book trying to decode what was happening to him, whether he was remembering or inventing, whether the distinction even mattered anymore. This is not a story about comic books or mystics or madmen. This is a story about you, about the architecture of self, about what happens when you realize identity is not discovered but constructed, not solid but scripted.
If you want to get like a good Grant Morrison example of basically all that he said right there, read Flex Mentalo. Flex Mentality is another very, very, very trippy book, but it does go into themes of where does the self end and the idea begin, and vice versa. Are we really just people living on Earth, or are we ideas thought up of someone by someone else? Is the someone else who thought of us another human? Are the someone else who thought of us like an otherworldly being? We don't know. It's kind of cosmic horror-y when you think about it. But Flex Mentallo is basically Grant Morrison's exploration of that. So if you want to understand that a little bit more, go read Flex Mentallo.
Not given, but generated frame by frame by an imagination you mistake for a camera when it has always been a projector. You are haunted by something you made. You have been performing a character so long the mask grew skin. And somewhere, in a room you cannot see, your future self is writing this moment, deciding what you do next, wondering if you will notice. 835. Grant Morrison does not write comic books. He performs rituals that happen to get printed on paper. He knows something the rest of us pretend we do not. That Superman is more real than most people you will meet today. That Batman has touched more lives than your neighbor. That these ink constructs have achieved a kind of immortality we will never taste. Morrison calls them hypersigils. Sigils are the tools of chaos magic. Symbols charged with intent, released into the world to make things happen. A hypersigil is bigger. It is an extended work of art, a story, a sustained act of imagination weaponized against consensus reality. You write the comic, you put yourself in it. You blur the line between author and character until the membrane dissolves, and suddenly, you are not sure who is writing whom. In 1994, Morrison created The Invisibles, a comic about anarchist time travelers fighting a war for human consciousness against interdimensional parasites. Already I'm loving it.
I tried to read The Invisible, guys. I tried, but I just got so lost after issue 2. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is this comic supposed to be? And every single person I've heard try to explain The Invisibles to me, they seem to be confused themselves on what exactly they're supposed to be looking at. I'm going to give this video a little bit more time to try and get to a point. If it's not really talking much about writing, we'll just find another video. But yeah, Invisibles is another one where he really gets into the idea of a tulpa and who's writing who. And if I've seen some panels from Invisibles after issue 2, where the characters are like interacting with the panels. They're like talking directly to the people to the reader themselves. Grant Morrison, at one point, this is his account of things, where he wrote a scene where King Mob is tortured by, I think it was a bacterial virus, and then Grant Morrison himself got super sick. So he's like, all right, I'll just write my character getting better again, and then I'll get better. And that's, according to him, exactly what happened. And it's like, okay. This is a very, very strange. All right, but
himself in it, became the character King Mob, shaved his head, wore the same clothes, did the things King Mob did. And then King Mob got shot in the comic, and Morrison got a staph infection that nearly killed him.
Oh, that's what it was, yeah.
The fever dreams lasted for days. He was in the hospital writing his own survival, retroactively editing the comic to save King Mob, which meant saving himself, which meant King Mob was saving him. The snake eating its tail, eating the snake. He learned. He made King Mob successful with women. Morrison's love life improved. He made King Mob rich. Checks started arriving. He gave King Mob confidence, and Morrison stood up straighter. The character was reaching backward through the page, reshaping the man who dreamed him. And Morrison realized, with the kind of clarity that feels like drowning, that maybe he had always been a character. Maybe we all are. This is not metaphor. This is not some literary device for people with liberal arts degrees to nod at over coffee. Morrison insists this literally. The beings we imagine are as real as we are because we are only as real as the attention we receive. You are a pattern of information held together by the belief that you continue. Your name is a sigil. Your face is a sigil. The story you tell about who you are is a spell you cast every morning to make sure you show up again. Stop telling the story and see what happens. Try it. For one full day, do not narrate yourself. Do not think I am the kind of person who drinks coffee this way, or I always do this, or that is just like me. Stop performing the character of yourself for the audience of yourself. What is left? What is there before you tell yourself who you are? The comic book is just technology. The page is just surface. What Morrison understood is that imagination is the factory where reality gets assembled. Not reality is in atoms and gravity. Reality is in the lived texture of being human. Reality as in what matters, what moves you, what you would die for.
All right, I think I don't think we're going to get much about writing itself. I think this is just mostly talking about Grant Morrison's idea of the tulpa. But I don't think his approach of just becoming your character is necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes, like, literally becoming the character or like getting into the mindset of the character will help you be a better writer yourself. I haven't really done that myself in my own writings. Like, I write Next Evolution, and my main character is a street fighter, essentially, but I have never been in a fight myself. I have no interest in getting into a fight myself. I don't know the first thing about fighting, but I try to imagine it myself. And, like, what would I do in a fight, or how I would handle this situation. To a certain extent, that is how I approach writing some of my characters, but I certainly don't want to become them. I'd like to keep a bit of a separation between me and the character. And that's how a lot of writers approach it. But let's see if we can find something a little bit more about, like, hearing more from Grant Morrison's perspective. I seen that. I seen that. All right, there's not a lot of whole. Grant Morrison explains life. Why Superman's relatable and interesting. Tribute to Grant Morrison. A lot of short clips. Not a whole. Well, there's Talking with Gods, but I think I might get copyright ass blasted if I try to play that. Okay. Talks about Superman, James Gunn, and having hope in the 21st century. On a life creating in comics. Okay, maybe this will be a good one.
Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like We 3, New X-Men, The Invisibles, All-Star Superman, and more, as well as the soon-to-be-released DC Marvel Batman Deadpool #1. It's Grant Morrison. Thanks for coming on, Grant.
Hi there, David. Thanks for inviting me.
So we're recording this on the morning of Wednesday, November 5th, and the early evening where you're at. Grant, how was your day?
It was fine. I had a bunch of work to do, and I kind of did it. It rained all day, so that was quite interesting. We haven't had rain for a long time, so it was nice to see again. It used to rain here every day, pretty much. You know, you could, even in the summer, it would rain in Scotland, but for the last couple of years, we've been quiet, so it was nice to get a day of rain. So honestly, all I've done is work all day, and this is a bonfire night over here, Guy Fawkes night, where they burn effigies of Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up Parliament in the 1700s, I think, or the 1600s. And so we have this night where people fire off fireworks and set bonfires, but it's pouring with rain. It's typical. So every time people are gathered to fire fireworks, it pours with rain. Yeah. So, but it
they're
should be quite
conspiring against.
spectacular in the sky. There should be a lot of activity going on tonight in the sky.
We were talking before we started recording about where we live and about how it's very dark during the winter and it's very bright during the summer. The funny thing about Alaska with fireworks is the only time anyone wants to actually shoot off fireworks is during the summer, because it's the one time it's not cold, but you can't see anything because it's so bright out. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it'll be spectacular.
You should just launch black fireworks that explode in black bursts against the sky. That's how you do it.
I think you just invented something. I think we need to make this happen. I don't even know how you would do that, but
someone will.
You said you were busy
will.
today.
Yeah.
Was it a writing day for you?
It's always a writing day. I mean, I write every day. You know, that's.
I try to get some writing done every day, and it's so hard. Well, it's not hard. It's just, sometimes I just don't feel like being in the writing mood, So, but I do try to write a little something every day.
Kind of what I do. I just do writing no matter what, whether I'm working on something or just doing something for pleasure. That's how I fill my time.
I mean, it seems like based off of your newsletter that you've been pretty re-energized of late when it comes to writing comics. I don't know. I mean, does the shape or the focus of what you've been working on, has that changed of late because of that? Or is it really just like, it's just always writing regardless of what the actual medium you're working in is?
Well, kind of, I mean, every medium has a different approach, and you have to go at it from a different angle. But it was a long time, I hadn't really done a lot of comics. I've been dabbling in the background, but there was a time, back like 15 years ago, I was doing like 5 or 6 comic books a month sometimes. So it was pretty intensive. And I got to the end of that and just thought, give me a break here, can I just do something else? So for the last couple of years, I was writing prose, or I've been writing for television or for movies. And that kind of occupied a lot of my time. But as I said, I did Batman Deadpool this year, and it just came out of the blue as a concept. And I really liked the notion of it. So once I got into that, I remembered that I'm actually quite good at writing comic books. So it kind of it kind of rekindled a fire for me. And yeah, definitely. I mean, in the last few months, summer was a write-off. It was terrible. It was too hot. But once summer kind of passed into the rearview mirror, I suddenly felt this surge of creative energy again. So yeah, I've got a bunch of comic stuff that I've been doing, and I'm just sort of halfway through a whole bunch of new things that I've been working on.
Are you the type of writer who, you have like, I don't want to say a whim. Whim's not right. It's not strong enough. Like when you have like a sudden urge where it's just like something hits where you're like, I feel like writing prose, or I feel like writing comics. Like, are you a very urge-based writer, or is it more planned out than that?
No, I kind of, honestly, these days I kind of go with stuff that lands in my lap. So if I get something unusual, someone will ask me to write, say, an introduction for a book, or they'll ask me to write a short story for something completely unexpected. And those are the things that I always enjoy, like the Deadpool Batman or Batman Deadpool.
I usually find also when I get stuck on my own writing that sometimes it's nice to just do something that you haven't done in a while, or try and tackle like a writing prompt that seems completely out of your wheelhouse. That's how I got some of my short stories done, is just getting just finding an interesting writing prompt and be like, okay, I'll try and make a story out of this. Sometimes limitations or like going outside of your comfort zone can be extremely helpful with generating creativity.
Where I wasn't expecting it, I had no intention of ever doing anything like that. But when it turned up as an idea, it just seemed like a really good one. So yeah, I kind of tend to react to stuff just showing up in my entry, and if it seems like fun, then it'll take me off on a journey.
So before we get into Batman Deadpool, I actually want to talk about some background stuff. I normally do that with first-time guests. For you, I want to go in an unusual direction. I have read Super Gods, which means that I know we share something unique. We jumped off the same bridge in New Zealand, the Kawarau Bridge.
Oh, the Kawarau River Bridge, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing my shirt right now. I wore it today.
Oh man, that's amazing! I've got one of those. Did you get your little video? Well, back in the day, it was a video they gave you. It was a video of the jump. So I have this old school like VHS tape, which is actually it's the entire drama of me quivering on the edge there before jumping over. So you know exactly how that feels.
I could not do that. I don't do well. I do. Funnily enough, I do well with like roller coasters or stuff like that, but I do not do well of just jumping off of stuff. I do not do well with that at all.
When they start counting down, it's like my mind just drained of all thought. It was like, what am I doing here? And there's nowhere to go but down. So that was it.
Can I share my story of my bungee jumping
Sure,
experience
please.
really quick? So I was on this big 6-month world trip. I was going around the world. I started in New Zealand, and then I went up through Australia, up into Asia, then went over to Europe, was there for like 3 months. And I had just had knee surgery. I had just had arthroscopic surgery on my knee. And so I was at the bungee jumping place, and I was like, I wonder if it would hurt my knee to go bungee jumping. I was just checking out the bungee jumping. And I went to go and I asked the people, and they're like, we don't know. Let's go ask like the guys who are the techs over there. So I walk over with the person, and the guy like thinks about it for a second. He's like, I don't know. Let's find out. And so I decided to go bungee jumping to find out. And it is funny, like when I was standing at the edge, I was so nervous building up to the moment. But as soon as he got to 3, 2, 1, I was off. And they still do. When I went, it was in 2011. I still got a tape. I had to transfer it to digital, and I still have the video of me jumping. But so, it was a very whim-based thing for me. But that's like the thing that I think is interesting about you is like having read Super Gods. You've done so much. You've definitely traveled the world, experienced a lot of things.
Yeah, I kind of went the opposite direction from you. So I went east, basically.
In the world trip?
Yeah, so I probably went to a lot of the same places you did, going west.
Was that when you did the bungee jumping?
No, I did that the year after. I did a world trip, and then the bungee thing was honestly, it was a pure whim. I was just sitting in a boring January, and I thought, I'm going to go to New Zealand and do a bungee jump because I'm bored. And I just got on a plane and went, so that was the only reason I went, really. And I did the thing, and then suddenly I was left with this 2 weeks of complete anticlimax.
Well, you did it to power a spell, right?
Yeah, for the Invisibles, to launch the Invisibles,
Yeah. I mean, it seemed to have worked, I imagine. I don't know. How do you know when something like that does the job it needs to do?
Well, there's a kind of weird click in your head or in your soul. I'm not sure what it is, but you kind of know. And then the Invisibles really worked out for me. It was a very central to my work. It became the kind of sun around which a lot of other things orbited, So as far as I'm concerned, the Invisibles were a very successful experiment. So I feel as if the bungee jump contributed to that, or in fact inaugurated that.
Yeah. Well, I was at a point in my life where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I kind of feel like the bungee jump was the moment that kind of pushed me into the next phase of my life in a really real way.
Yeah.
But you do seem like somebody who pushes yourself to try new things. How do you feel your experiences, like the whim to go jump off of a bridge and then hang out in New Zealand for 2 weeks or travel around the world in the opposite direction I did? How do those fuel you as a creative person?
Well, you'll know this from traveling. People will talk about, you can go to any city in the world and they're kind of all the same. People are the same the world over. Everyone understands Shakespeare. We all go through the same emotions. But as you know, different places are really, really different when you're in them. And that's what I loved. It was, as a creative person, to be in a culture that was actually so genuinely different. And even though, people all have ultimately have the same emotions, the way those things play out and the kind of architecture around them and the kind of social structures around them are so radically different from where I came from that it was just every day was revelation. Every day was some new understanding, and even just things like, that was the first time I shaved my head to travel. And I found myself it was in Java, on the island of Java. And everywhere I went, people would bring their kids out and point at me and go, Shaolin, Shaolin. And they would just be in hysterics laughing at me. So I had to get used to this thing of like wandering about being laughed at everywhere I went. I just kind of loved that because it was so very different from home, and everything was different, and the drinks were different, and the people were different, and the experiences were different. So yeah, I mean, as a writer and as a creative person, that was just like an overload of new stuff that I spent decades processing and writing about and thinking about, and still do, you know.
I think, yeah, that's kind of part of the reason why I still want to maintain at least some kind of job or do some kind of other thing outside of writing, is because writers tend to get stuck in their own heads a lot, and I am 100% guilty of this. So just getting out there and interacting with people and just being in the moment, it keeps me grounded and it keeps me from going completely bonkers. Because I definitely would, if I were one of those authors who decided to just get a cabin in the woods and stay there all the time while I'm writing, I feel like my writing would just get very stale after a while. You know?
It's as I say, the thing that I find most interesting is that different places are really different, and people who assume that I don't need to travel because everywhere's kind of the same are missing out on how very different it feels to be in a really unusual setting.
Yeah, I mean, even New Zealand, which, you know, is the direct opposite part of the world of Alaska, it is so different. Like that was one of the things that stood out to me there is the people are so friendly and so kind of small town everywhere that, like, if I was walking, I had people just stop and say, "Do you need a ride?" And it was just out of the generosity of their heart. It was the only time I ever
and they weren't serial killers.
Exactly. They just wanted to drive me somewhere because that's how they were. But talking to a lot of creators on this podcast, like I remember talking to James Tynan, and he was talking about the fact that it's important to have different experiences, different inputs, because that's the only way you can kind of put something new into the world. Do you think it's important for creative people to put themselves in new situations like that and to try new things?
Well, I guess it's important for some of them, and I'm sure there are creative people who can quite happily just lie in their bed like Marcel Proust and produce gigantic novels based on the cakes that they're eating in bed. So it doesn't necessarily work for everyone, or it's not necessarily a necessity for everyone, but certainly for me. And the type of work I do, which is quite wide ranging, you know, when you're working in comics, a Batman's different from a Superman, is different from a Wonder Woman, is different from the X-Men. So you're kind of trying to get as much input as you can to make sure that you can approach all these different ideas from different angles. So for me, it was definitely very important. You know, I just thought it was a fundamental thing. But my whole approach has always been to treat myself kind of as an experiment, that I am the laboratory, you know, for the work. So I'll throw myself into all kinds of insane situations just so that I've got material, and I kind of I'm a bit cruel to myself in that way, you know. It's just Grant just goes out and has to do stuff so that I can write about it, you know.
Have you been skydiving?
That's the one thing I haven't. It really annoyed me. I meant to do it because my father was a paratrooper in the war. And I thought, I've got to do a skydive because my dad was a paratrooper and I really should experience that. But I still have not done it. I kind of, I lost my nerve a little bit. But I might still do it. You know, when I'm really old, I'll just get someone to push me out with a stick. You
know? My boyfriend and I had this conversation where what would happen if we became like a vegetable or we became brain dead. And he told me, hey, babe, if I end up in that situation, I want you to take me skydiving. Just have someone strap me to their chest and just push me out of the airplane so I could go skydiving. It's like, really, babe? You want me to do that to you? Oh my gosh, he's such a goober.
When I finished my bungee jump, actually, one of the things that somebody asked is like, you know, the next step is skydiving. And it was, let's see, it was 14 years ago and I still haven't done it. And I keep trying to work up my nerve. There's something about it that's a little scary, but you're a laboratory. You put yourself through experiments. How is that just about like opportunities present themselves, or is it about creating opportunities for you? Like, how do you make yourself a laboratory?
Certainly a bit of both, going out and doing things specifically to find out what that is or how that works. I would do that. But at the same time, you have to be ready and able to deal with new stuff. So I'm always, if something new come out, I used to have the idea that I would just say yes to anything. So if somebody phoned me up at 3 a.m. and said, "Do you want to come to a party?" I'd go, "Okay, yes," and rouse myself out of bed, or
Maybe I should take up boxing lessons, like the fuck. Fuck. Why do I keep blanking on her name? 2 seconds. Ann Nocenti. Yeah, Ann Nocenti. I have no idea why I keep blanking on her name. But yeah, Ann Nocenti, famously, she went and took some boxing classes to understand fighting better because she didn't really know how to throw a punch, and she wanted to better understand how to throw a punch so she can write Daredevil better, which I think is pretty cool. And maybe I should do that for my own, because I think I write fighting okay. I still getting used to the whole coordinating with an artist on how exactly things are going to go in the panel. So I think I'm doing okay. I don't know. Like I said, I've never been in a fight. Don't know how to throw a punch. Probably should learn it.
When I was in Australia, I really wanted to go to sleep, but there was a bus tour out to the Olgas, the big red hills in the central desert. And I just went, okay, yes, I've got to say yes to everything. So I mean, not so much of that now, but certainly during the 90s when I was really deep into this idea of kind of just experiencing a lot and doing magic stuff and occult stuff and summoning demons and doing all of that just to see, does this work? Is this real? Can I get inspiration from this? And in most cases, yes, it worked. It was real, and I did get inspiration from it. But that was a specific period. I'm maybe a bit less of the gung ho these days.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. But I do want to talk about how that manifests in your comics, because I had Frank Quitely on the podcast, and we talked about We Three, which you did together. And one of the things that really stood out is it sounded like that process of making that comic, which to me, I do want to note, is a very special comic for me. I'm an animal lover, which definitely factors in, but there was something singular and special about that comic that totally like rewired my brain about the potential of the medium. Frank made it seem like you all had a very unusual approach for putting that one together, and like you were trying to push the medium in a very specific way. Do you try to do that same thing with your life, with your comic work, where you're trying to say, how can I push this medium in a way visually, as a writer, process things like that? Is that something you do?
Yeah, always. I mean, for me, around that time when We Three was being written, there's quite a lot of those comics, like JLA Classified and the stuff I was doing, Seven Soldiers with J.H. Williams. And I got really into the notion of those, weird panel structures and playing with time using the panels. So there was a lot of that around that came out of the Invisibles, where I started to look at the surface of the page and the sort of dimensionality of my relationship to the page and what you could do with the page if you stopped looking at it as a flat surface, but almost as a screen with depth, so that you could float and rotate panels and they didn't necessarily have to be pasted on. So there was a lot of thinking around that time. And then with We Three, certainly it was about, let's do a whole comic that's kind of about animal perception. And even though it's not necessarily how animals would see things with all those shuttered kind of panels, but it was a way of trying to get into an alien way of looking at time and space through the comic page. And yeah, I mean, Vinny, Frank Quitely and I would sit just working out those pages on paper in cafes and really just getting it down and trying to think, oh, how do you do that? How do you turn that rotation? How do you make this thing? How do you do a wraparound cinema scope kind of effect on the page that has a depth and also has a kind of a dimensionality? So yeah, there was a lot of that. Then if you look at something like All-Star Superman, where it's the complete opposite, where we went for a super classical just measured, kind of everything's at a kind of proscenium arch, remote almost. The characters are clearly acting within a space. And again, we did it with Pax Americana, where we splintered all the panels and made it almost like animation, so there was multiple types of movement through all the panels. But just again, all of them are played very differently. But with a really good artist like with Frank, you can explore a lot of nuance in what's possible. And as I say, I've tried to do various things. I've done 9-panel grids. I've done the 16-panel Frank.
I think, yeah, it's the language barrier between Martin and I kind of prevent us from doing a lot of what he's talking about. But we do try to communicate like how exactly the panel is going to turn out. And sometimes he even surprises me by adding in details that that was either never in the script, or he will draw a panel in a way that I didn't even think of. So, and it's always a pleasant surprise whenever I see it for the first time.
Miller type approaches, because all of them give you a different way of telling the story, and that's all interesting to me. So it tends to be, what's the story and what's the method of telling that will most serve that story.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. This January, Oni Press proudly presents Spirit of the Shadows #1, the most visually dazzling and hauntingly heartfelt superhero horror hit of 2026. A stunning new 5-part series drawn from the darkest recesses of the imagination of co-writers Nick Cagnetti and Daniel Ziegler, and featuring the first full-length artwork by Cagnetti since his electrifying debut with 2022's Pink Lemonade. Once, Eric LaRue was a mortal musician until his sudden death plunged his soul into the carnival-like torments of the spirit world. And now, back to the show. Well, and it seems to me, I mean, you're an artist too, so it seems to me that like that's one thing that is important for you is I don't know how this manifests in your scripts, but like it seems like no matter what project you're working on, it's not like you're writing without visuals in your head or without talking with artists.
No,
You are
absolutely
definitely
not.
going in thinking, yeah, you're I don't want to maybe visual first. I mean, you seem like the type of person who's like the words in the visuals are inescapable even from the script phase.
Yeah, I mean, I usually start with drawings, or I'll start with just vague. A conversation will occur in my head, like it did with Batman Deadpool, and that got me started. But most of the time, I'm sitting with my sketchbook, and I start doing the big images that I think will tell the story best. And so you'll have a big one at the start, and something in the middle, and something at the end, and slowly it forms in that way. So the comics are all drawn out as thumbnail versions, like little miniature thumbnail versions. Some of them are even coloured. It depends how much time I've got or how invested I am in doing it.
I do something very similar. I've shown this off many, many times. I will just draw stick characters to help me visual. It's mostly for me. I don't really show them to Martin anymore because we have gotten to a point where he doesn't need me to send them. But for myself, I will sketch out the page first before I start writing the script, so I could just have like a visual of what exactly I am trying to accomplish here.
But I'd rarely show those to the artist, but at least it gives me something to work from. And it means that when I'm doing a panel description, all the visual information is there and I can include it. And it also means I don't have to overload it as well. I know what's the important part of the panel. I know what's the secondary level or the third level. And beyond that, you don't want it to get too overwrought or overloaded. So it gives me a really good basis from which to start, because I can see the thing in my hand. And also, I like to draw things that an artist would want to draw. So I tend to do things that if I had to draw the book, I'd want to draw this, rather than some writers I know just go in with all their clever dialogue and fill pages with talking heads, which artists really hate. So I tend to keep everything in motion and in movement constantly in the stories and go about them that way. But it's very much about playing out the movie that I see in my head and breaking it down into discrete images.
You've worked with some absolutely incredible artists throughout your entire career. I mean, we mentioned.
I got a question for any artists that might be in the audience. What's like the most annoying thing that a writer can do for a comic book? Like a specific kind of panel setup or a specific like style or a specific request that you find the most annoying that comic book writers will ask of you? Because I try to keep my comic book exciting, not just for the readers, but also for Martin when he's drawing it. So I'm curious for you artists, like what is the most annoying thing that writers can either do or request?
And Frank, then you're working with Dan Mora. Some of you worked with on Klaus. You're also working with on Batman, Deadpool. You worked with a ton of different talents. Do you feel like that movie within your head and what you see comics as being capable of has evolved because of the artistic partners you've worked with over your career?
Oh, definitely. I mean, and you do kind of tend towards the strengths of whoever you're working with. There's a certain types of artists that really have appealed to me. You know, when I worked with J.H. Williams, as I say, or a Fraser Irving, it's the real stylists that I like. You know, because they come at it from a different storytelling approach than I do generally, and it means I learn a lot from watching them. You know, Doug Mankey was another one, and Yannick Paquette on the Wonder Woman stuff. All these guys have really strong visual identity in their work, and so that definitely feeds back, and it allows me.
I think there is this documentary, I think it's called Talking to Ghosts, for Warren Ellis, and at one point he's talking about, you know, meeting up with the artist and trying to figure out exactly how they're going to tackle a specific project. And he's like, something I like to do is I'll ask the artist, well, what is it that you enjoy drawing? Like, what do you like to draw? And he was talking this Avatar project that he worked on. He asked the artist, what is it that you like to draw? So he can like get an idea of what kind of script to write. And the artist is like, girls, motorbikes, girls, black leather, girls, monsters. Did I mention girls? So Warren Ellis just kind of wrote the script around the artist's interest to keep him engaged, which also a very interesting approach.
Me to understand what really works in a page and what works with a specific artist that might not work with another artist.
JH is a perfect example because, like, I think sometimes comics can get into a box of like what it's capable of, but you look at somebody like J.H. Williams III, and like there is, especially like I think of his Batwoman work or his detective work with Greg Rucka, and it was like you would look at those pages and you never seen pages like that before, and it kind of made you think like, is this all comics are capable of? And I think that is.
We should have started with this interview. I'm realizing we should have started with this one. I try to pick videos where it's like I can watch this like within an hour, maybe a little bit over. But that's why I avoid them, because I can't just play the interview. I'll get copyright struck. But I'm realizing now we should have just stuck with this interview.
Is like one of the magical parts about the art is the fact that like if you work with the right partner, all of a sudden your book looks like nothing in comic book history, and that's something amazing.
Well,
before I started working with Martin Gimenez, I was recommended a few other artists. Well, not recommended, but I was just asking around like, hey, does anyone know any artists who are open for comic book work? And one of them, it's like the style was more on the surreal side, and I didn't think that would be good for Next Evolution, because Next Evolution is more like a realistic-ish action thriller. And the other one, it was very obviously like softcore porn. And I just took one look at that and I'm like, I am not going to do this for my comic book. I don't want to do that for my comic book. So, and yeah, you do have to pick an artist who would be the best fit for the type of story that you want to do. Like, you don't want to pick a softcore porn artist to write your kids' book, for example. And you don't want to do like a horror artist to do like a magical girl story, unless the entire point of the magical girl story is it's kind of a parody, or it's kind of supposed to be shocking.
That's like on the Wonder Woman book. Yannick Paquette was adding all kinds of motifs and flourishes that then fed back and affected the storytelling, because I could see, he was using the golden twine of Wonder Woman's lasso to frame sequences and scenes. And that actually gave me an idea for the ending, because you see the Fates cutting the cord, and it was just a perfect visual of, the Atropos, the Elder Fate, cutting the cord. And that only worked because Yannick had been running that same golden cord through the entire, 100 pages of the story. So yeah, it works all the time, and you do see. There are also great comics that are just done like movie screens. There was a lot of that around the turn of the century, stuff like the Ultimates and John Cassidy's work, which was very much influenced by blockbuster movies. So they would use the long horizontal panel, which kind of imitated the shape of a widescreen movie, and they would have black pages rather than white pages to the background, so it was kind of like how you see things in a darkened movie theater. And a lot of those comics were really great as well, and they worked. But I do feel more drawn towards the wilder layouts and the more artistic approach. And I think that's just because I grew up in the 70s, and people like Neil Adams and like who are the names, Jim Starlin and those people that I loved.
That's good to know. I'm not the only one who's completely stupid when it comes to names.
And Craig Russell were doing these fabulous kind of Baroque and beautiful page layouts. So I think ultimately, if you're doing comics, then it's something to take advantage of, because it is something that no other form can do. The only time I've ever seen it attempted was in Ang Lee's Hulk movie, which I really loved, and which was kind of an influence on We Three because of the way he did those transitions to try and mimic comic book shapes and comic book pages, and I found it quite fascinating. I still think that that's what makes that film still interesting, and no one's really attempted to do anything like it since.
I think the thing is like, to some degree, like you were talking about how there was the widescreen comics from the early 2000s.
Mhm.
That was the right answer for them on that project. But the
Yeah.
thing is like, I think ultimately, I'm not a comic creator, so I'm speaking broadly for a group, or specifically for a group of people. But I kind of feel like the thing that I've always really appreciated about your work is like, you don't seem like you have necessarily like a North Star of like, this is the type of project I have to do. This is what I need to do on it. And this is how it should look. You always kind of seem like you do what feels right for you in the moment for that project. Is that kind of your ethos on how you approach comics?
Yeah, and I've kind of, obviously, as years have gone by and you kind of get better, or you're more aware of what you do, I think I've focused a lot on craft in the last decade or so, and about really putting it together and how you build these things, and then the kind of the farmer's market version of it all. But there was always that sense of just of going into something and getting the sound right. For me, it was always the sound of something, or the musicality of it, the poetry of it. So I kind of didn't plan a lot of stuff, and that's probably the difference between now and then, is that now, as I say, there's a more craft-based approach where I will plan things and I'll put that scene directly in the middle because that's kind of where that scene should go, or this will happen on page 10 because that fits a particular structure that I've created.
Yeah, I said this last week when talking more just about prose and writing in general. You gotta pick the writing style that will fit the kind of thing you want to write. Like, some stories work best as minimalist, some more stories work best as a maximalist. Some stories work better fast-paced, some work better slow-paced. And especially when it comes to when you're writing specific characters, like there's a very big difference between how a Superman story is told versus how a Green Arrow story is told. The question can be is tackled differently from The Flash. And yeah, trying to nail that voice. Like I said earlier, he's tackling writing more as okay, who are these characters, and not necessarily how would I be this way. And you do have to, with the different characters, the different tones and the different voices, you do have to tackle it differently. You can't broad brush everything and be like, all right, this is how I'm gonna do it all. No, you gotta get the feel, and then you write.
But the kind of approach that I've always relied on is just, does it feel right? Does this feel right? And even if it's something I think readers are going to freak out, this isn't going to work for them, I'll still do it as long as it feels right for me, which explains a lot of Final Crisis, for instance. But for me, it's like, does this sound right? Is this exactly the noise I'm trying to get? And is this how I want people to feel? Is this awkwardness or confusion exactly what I want them to feel? And then I do it, and the worry is always like, oh my God, I've done it now. People are going to tell me I've made a terrible mistake. But it's usually I feel, no, that was right. It was always right to follow that instinct of going for the sound of it. Does it sound right? And then if it sounds right, I'll let it out the house.
The funny thing about you saying that is, like, in my head, like, I was talking with a couple other people in comics about your work, and I was talking about how, like, even when I don't 100% love one of your projects, I appreciate how big your swings are. And, like, in my mind, I'm just like, Grant is always going for these big swings, but it seems like it's not even that. It's something purer than that. It's like, it's what feels right, what sounds right for that moment.
Yeah.
You're not trying to be like, what is the craziest thing I could do right now? It's just like, what does this project need?
It's never that. And usually I'm trying really hard not to do crazy things. I'm trying to do stuff.
I do not believe that for a second, sir. Oh, that is... Oh my gosh, this is too hilarious for him to say that. But let's hear him out. Let's hear how he doesn't try to go for crazy.
Because I've been successful over many decades, and that's because the work is actually, people quite like the work, So
Yeah, they do.
to me, it just becomes about not to do something crazy, but to do something true to the project. And even if that seems a bit odd, or if it seems, a bit unorthodox compared to other comics, I'd rather do that. Because I think over time, people tend to reevaluate these things anyway. And
I wonder if Grant Morrison even thinks of some of the weird stuff he does is weird. He is more of a go with the flow kind of vibe guy, but I wonder if at this point he sees some of this stuff he does as weird.
to understand what you were doing and to realize why you were doing it. So it tends to be there's a flurry of shock of the new at the start of these projects, but I usually wait 5-10 years and people start to reappraise them and say this was actually quite good all along. So I just kind of wait for that,
That brings in the Batman.
There are a couple of Grant Morrison comics where it's like they very much are different at the time, and it usually doesn't take until a few years later. Like I kind of remember hearing people talking about We 3 when it came out, but I haven't really seen people talk about, oh my gosh, this comic book is amazing until like the last couple of years. So, or maybe I'm just misremembering those events, but what do you guys think? Like, what's your favorite comic book where at the time it wasn't appreciated, but nowadays it's like, oh, actually, yeah, this is actually fabulous. We need more of this. Why isn't there more of this? All right. I don't think we're going to be getting anybody in today, and I am about at the hour mark, so we'll just stop the stream here. I'll put the link for this interview down below, so if you guys want to watch the rest of it, you can go ahead and do that. Give all of the channels I've showcased here a little peek. And yeah, let's see if I can exit out of this. There we are. All right. Well, before we go, this is the final product of my mustard man. I think he is looking a lot better. He looks more like the golden boy he's supposed to be and not Mr. Mustard. So at least I got that going for me. And if you like the stream, let me know. If you have anything else that you want me to react to, let me know. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.